Have you ever felt like you were in a power struggle with your kids? That one of your children just seemed to find every opportunity to challenge, to argue, to use anger? So many times I hear from parents talking about how their children are challenging their authority, getting into arguments and fights, and they can't believe sometimes it's over the stupidest stuff. They're like, really? I just wanted to do this, and now I got a kid who's fighting with me over something that they don't even need to fight about. Let's talk about what we can do to use some heart-based tools to help children who are struggling with using anger to have some control in life. The first thing we need to do as parents is recognize our tendency to want to exert our power, to exert our control, to demonstrate to this kid, I'm in control, you're not. Usually we struggle with that because we don't feel in control. Oftentimes, some of our children pick up on that, and that pushes them forward. But we need to resist the urge to prove ourselves, to demonstrate, well, I'm in charge here and you're going to respect me. We're not going to get very far. In fact, we're often going to put more distance between us and our child. And that's not going to help us in the long run. So what can we do? Well, the first thing we need to do is, besides resisting that urge to prove ourselves, is to take a deep breath and start asking some questions. I call this using the strategy of getting curious to understand some of the whys behind what your child's showing as anger. Because I don't know a kid who wakes up in the morning going, all right, can't wait to ruin her day, can't wait to ruin his day. That's just not what they wake up thinking. Oftentimes, behind the anger that's trying to control is a lot more under the surface, deeper down in the heart. Behavior is a way that children communicate. And so we need to be asking ourselves what's really going on here so we can come up with a better plan for how to respond. So I'm going to give you 4 questions to ask, and then I'm going to give you 7 possible reasons why children start using anger to control situations. So first question you want to ask yourself is, do I see any patterns? When you start noticing your child trying to control situations, argue with you, yell at you, demand you something of you, tell you they're not going to do this, whatever it might be, start looking for patterns. Is this happening across the board with lots of areas of life? Is this happening over one thing in life? Maybe they're great at following instructions when they need to clean up, when they need to do things around the house. But when it comes to homework, that's where the arguments happen. That's telling. It tells us that there's some good things going on in the heart, but something about the homework that's causing some of the bad stuff to come out here. Versus seeing it globally around all kinds of areas of life, that tells us we've got some deeper heart work to do. So first of all, start looking for some patterns. I remember a family I was working with that noticed a pattern that some of this behavior cropped up after having too much sugar and food dyes. And so they discovered a biological reason behind some of the behavior that they were struggling with, which was a welcomed revelation for them because their kid generally was doing well, but something about having these different chemicals in his body threw him off in a way that he really struggled with anger and control at that point. So they were able to make some changes. So 1, look for patterns. 2, listen for emotional cues. Notice what's happening just before the problem happens. We're not just looking for patterns across the day and the week. We're looking specifically at the emotional cues our child is giving us. Some of us are able to say, I know when my kid's about to have a problem because he starts doing this, she starts doing that. She starts slamming things around the house, he starts grunting, whatever it might be. Notice those emotional cues because you're going to need to teach your child about those emotional cues if they're ever going to take this on for themselves. Just start noticing the emotional cues your child offers, because if you notice them earlier on, you have a better chance of putting into place a strategy or a tool that can get them back on course before they get really far off. If we wait too long, if we don't notice the problem until the kid's yelling and screaming, we are way off track. And getting back on track is going to take more work. But if we notice things pretty quickly, we can respond in a way that is supportive. It helps children move back on track a lot quicker. So we're going to look for patterns. We're going to notice emotional cues. The third thing I want you to do is start asking yourself, what is the motivations that I believe are behind the behavior that I'm seeing? Sometimes children are exerting control and using anger to exert control because they're trying to avoid something. They don't want to do chores. They don't want to go to karate class, whatever it might be. Other times, they're looking to get something. They have this motivation that they want certain things, so they're going to control it. They might be using anger to control maybe even their siblings because they want to get to the movie night and they know they can't get to the movie night till all the chores are done. So they start yelling and screaming at their siblings to get their chores done. That might be their motivation. Sometimes it's to avoid things. Sometimes it's to get things. Other times, they're not feeling heard. And the reason the anger is coming out because they're not feeling heard. And so that now is going to have us using some different strategies to help them. The fourth question you're going to ask yourself is, do I notice any specific triggers? Are there specific triggers that I see around my child. If I ask them this question, is that when it really upsets them? Is it during certain chores or during certain times of day? Look for specific triggers. Is it around certain people or certain situations? If you can identify triggers, we can give strategies around those triggering moments or situations or people or whatever it might be. Those are the 4 questions you're going to ask yourself and start coming up with some ideas. Now, we got lots of reasons why children start using anger and control in life. I'm going to give you 7 possibilities here. And honestly, we could probably spread these out to about 10 possibilities. I'm going to put some of them together because it just logically makes sense. We're going to talk about the possibility of why they might be doing something and some solutions based on that. You see, if we go back to the start of this video, I told you resist the urge to just prove your authority, to tell your kid they're wrong and I'm in charge here. Because when we do that, we don't ever dig deeper into the heart and understand our child a little bit better. First reason, some children are using anger and control because they have a desire for independence or to have more voice in their life. They may feel like I'm old enough to do this. They may be wrong, they may be right, but they feel this way. Other times they want more voice, more say in life circumstances. We need to understand that when your kid is in the moment and they're responding with anger, rather than you proving yourself, pause for a minute, take a deep breath and say, hold on 1 second. I don't understand. You usually are very cooperative. What's making this so hard? What's the problem here? We're not going to ask it in a dismissive way. We're not going to tell them, oh, what's the problem? But we are going to simply be curious. Hey, I'm not getting this. What's making this so hard? They might tell you, I just want to be able to blah. I never get a chance to say what I want to do. I never get a choice of what I do. Oh, okay. This is a very immature way to ask for more voice, to ask for independence, and we will deal with that and talk about a much more mature way to do it. But once you hear that, you can say to yourself, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. When we hear that, when we hear kids trying to tell us they feel unheard, they feel unloved, they feel unimportant, things like that, we don't want to respond by saying, this isn't how you get it. That may go through our minds, but we need to pause, take a step back and empathize in this moment. I'm so sorry you feel that way. That's not our intention at all. That lets your child know I'm being heard right now. It starts to take their temperature down a bit. You start to help them regulate. And then you can say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. You feel unheard. Let me teach you the right way, though, to get permission to do that. And then teach them how you want them to do it. Show them, model for them. Use the teaching tool that we talk about. We talk about these 7 heart tools. We're using relationship when we empathize. We're using firmness when we just say, whoa, 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 whoa. Right? The right way to do this. What's making this so hard? That's firmness. Right? It's not harshness. We're not going to use harshness. That's not a tool God gives us. Firmness, though, is. And I'm using firmness by suggesting we're not going to keep going down this way. You can't keep yelling at me like this. But instead of taking a stance of, that's no way to speak to me, you need to go sit over there, take a break, come back and see me when you're ready, which is an okay response. You might decide to do that sometimes. But I'm going to suggest there's a lot of times where that isn't going to get you as far as just simply saying, whoa, what's going on here? I don't get it. You usually do a great job. Why are you having a hard time with this? We're using firmness to say we're putting this thing on pause and we're figuring this out so it's done the right way. That's firmness at that point. Then we're using relationship with the empathy, and then we're going to use the teaching and coaching tools to teach this child the right way to make that request. And then we're going to transfer responsibility to them and have them use the strategy we just gave them. So I might teach them a better way to ask for more time to do that chore, a better way to request that they do that chore later. And I'm going to warn them before I answer, especially if I'm going to say no. Listen, you made a good request here. Thank you. I might say yes, I might say no. Sometimes I'm going to say yes. In fact, I'd love to say yes a lot of times, but sometimes I might have to say no. In this case, it has to be a no because we're doing this. So you do need to get this done. Now, if your child doubles down and shows anger again, we've got other responses. And this is where I might say, whoa, I'm trying to meet you halfway and you're not ready. You need to take a break. I have done more than what is expected as a parent to really help a child through that. But a desire for independence and a desire for more voice in my life is one of those first reasons why we see children use anger and control. Now, you might have heard some parent gurus talk about giving kids choices. A lot of times I hear people talk about giving kids choices, and then I see it implemented. And when it's implemented, parents ultimately don't like doing it because they feel like they're running around having to always give choices. Shouldn't the kid just have to do what I tell them to do? Yeah, that's the goal, is that if I tell them something, obviously we're assuming you're doing it in a respectful, cooperative way. But if I'm telling you something, yeah, you should follow through on that. But sometimes kids struggle with this. And so, yes, it is okay to give them a choice, but they need to be 2 choices that you can live with. So maybe it's a choice about, well, you could complete this now, or you can complete this in a half hour. Well, you could clean the bathroom first, you can clean your bedroom first. I don't know what it might be, but we're going to give choices that are reasonable that I'm okay with giving. Sometimes we can't give choices because they're just not available to us. But there's a lot of times where we get help. I remember watching one of my younger daughters recently. She was just having a hard day. Lots of tears over everything, frustrated with life, siblings, whatever it was with siblings that day, feeling like she was just tired from the long day. And then she had to do a little chore here and was melting down over lots of things. So I called her into the kitchen to do something, and I realized she was needing to get ready for bed. And I realized if I just tell her to go get her jammies on, I think she's going to melt down again. So instead I looked at her, I said, hey, so we're going to have dinner pretty soon. You could either put your shoes away and then go get changed to your jammies, or get changed to your jammies first and then just get the shoes away real quick. She looked at me and she smiled and said, I'm going to put the shoes away first. Okay, great. Go do that. Just that little bit of choice helped her, as she was having a rough day, be able to respond so positively. And I was so excited for her. And she did a great job with both. But had I just insisted, hey, you need to do this, she wasn't ready for that day. You see, in the moment of parenting, we're constantly deciding, does my child in this moment need more relationship or more responsiveness? There are times in our children's life where they need to learn to be responsive to the authority God's put in their life, us. And so when we tell them something, they need to just go ahead and do it. But there's other times where they need more relationship and where we need to come alongside of them and support them in that. And that's the decision you're making. That's why I don't give you this prescribed, it's always this way with kids. That was a lot around just the first reason. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through these other reasons. Second reason that we see children using control and anger in relationships with parents is often a fear. It's a fear-based control. Fear of losing some security, fear of the lack of predictability. They're scared in that moment. And so they're using anger and control to try and control the environment more. When we see this, we need to start picking up on it. This is when we start asking those questions internally before we get in these situations. My kid always seems to struggle with anger in these moments. What is going on there? When we suspect it's about a loss of security, a loss of predictability, the schedule's changing, whatever it might be, that's when we're going to be using the relationship tool a lot. This child needs us to draw them closer, to address some of the underlying fears. We might need to use that calm response that I've taught you before, where we help them lean on God's truth, understand what the fear might be, and then give them a map to move forward. Here's a very specific thing you can do to take God's truths and address the fear you're having. And I'm going to be right there along the way helping you with that. That's how we help kids. We're using the relationship tool and the teaching and coaching tools to help them move forward. The third thing we see children often struggling with is when they're exerting control with anger, they're often trying to avoid responsibilities or avoid consequences. And this is one I think lots of parents suspect right away. And sometimes we suspect it incorrectly. And that's why I'm encouraging you, ask those 4 questions that I showed you at the beginning here. But when we do come to the conclusion that the reason my child is using anger to control a situation and control our relationship because they're trying to avoid responsibilities and consequences, that's when we do need to use, we're still using the relationship tool. Everything we do is inside that tool, but we do need to use more firmness with children. We do need to insist that they do the things that we told them to do. We do need to insist that, yes, these consequences are in place and they're really there to help you. I'm not interested in punishing you and torturing you. I'm interested in discipling you. Discipline should be to teach. And that's why this consequence is in place. So yeah, we have to use firmness, not harshness, firmness in that situation and help them through. In the moment, our child who is using anger is probably not ready for that message. They probably need to calm down, take a break, come back and see us when they're ready so we can talk to them and address this more fully. But we do need to use the firmness tool to help them understand, yeah, you can't try to scare us out of doing this. You can't try to control your way out of this. We need to just deal with this. The fourth reason we see children using control and anger is when they're testing boundaries in relationships. And again, this is going to be a case where we're using both relationship and firmness together. Children, I'll say, are often like good night watchmen. We don't think about night watchmen anymore. We think about security guards, and now we got cameras everywhere. You might remember in the movies and things like that, you would see like the night watchman on at the office building or the store. When he walks around, he's got his flashlight. Why he didn't turn on lights is beyond me in the movies, but he's walking around with his flashlight and he's just checking all the rooms. He wants to find the doors locked in all the offices in this store. And so he wants to check a door and find it's locked, just like he left it last time. But if he finds a door that's unlocked, he doesn't get to walk away. He needs to walk into that room and explore it to see what else is going on. Is there a danger in here? Because there is a danger, he has to address it. Our children are like that. When they're pushing boundaries, they're oftentimes asking themselves, where are the boundaries? How far out are they? One of the worst things we can do is to not enforce some healthy boundaries in family life. I can't tell you the number of adults I've heard talk about They're parents who didn't enforce boundaries, who felt like if their kids push back, oh, I guess that's them expressing themselves. We want children to express themselves, but we also want to teach them that there are some boundaries, that there's a difference in our relationship. I'm the adult, you're the child, all those healthy things that help them grow up secure emotionally, socially, physically. Because when they push on boundaries and we don't reinforce them in a healthy way, they keep pushing. They're looking, where's the boundary? Is there any danger in here? And when they get to be adults, they say, I can't believe my parents let me do that. I was so scared. That's why I kept pushing that boundary. Your child's scared in those moments when they're looking for boundaries to be reinforced. So we need to reinforce them. The problem is, I think when I say this, reinforce boundaries, whenever we talk about firmness, I really have to talk about it's not harshness. Any suggestion that we're firm sometimes doesn't ring well in a lot of modern parenting ears. But firmness is an important tool. We need that. And usually we don't like firmness for ourselves. Sometimes we're like, oh, I don't know if I should be firm with my child here. But we want firmness for the other guy. That guy who just zipped by you on the highway and is zigzagging in and out of traffic. You look at every single time. Do you believe this guy? Never a cop around when you need one. Firmness for that person. Because we recognize that person needs some firmness there. So we need to recognize our own bias here. Firmness is not the problem. Usually the way we've implemented is a problem because we've used harshness. The difference between firmness and harshness, firmness is a part of a relationship where we say, this is not helpful for you. I use firmness when I recognize you're going down a path that isn't going to serve you well in some way, shape, or form. I use firmness when my child tries to run out into the street. Nope, we're not going there. Right? And if they keep trying to do it, we're not walking out front anymore. We're going inside. Why? Because what they're trying to do is not safe for them. Harshness, on the other hand, is when I allow my emotions to get mixed up in the application of firmness. And that's where I've crossed a line. That's why harshness is wrong. And it's harshness that has given firmness the bad rap. Because so many of us adults haven't learned how to navigate our own emotions, and we've allowed them to enter into our parenting in negative ways that are wrong to use with children. But it's not the firmness that's the problem. It's the harshness that is. When children are struggling with stress or anxiety, that's often a time when you might see some anger and control come out because they're already anxious about the world. They're worried about something. And so the way they deal with it, control what they can. And if that means they're going to control using anger, it's what they need at that moment. Oh, it's not what they need at that moment, right? But it's what they think they need at that moment. And so we're going to use that calm approach where we connect, we attune, we lean on God's truth, and we map out a plan forward. We need to teach them a better way. We need to teach them this is not the way to get peace. Anger and control do not lead to peace. Trusting in the Lord does lead to peace. Let's show you how to practically do it in this situation. When children are struggling with stress and anxiety, and they're getting snippy, angry, loud, yelling, that's when we need to help them calm and come up with a better plan to move forward. The sixth reason why we see children using anger and control in relationships is they struggle with emotional regulation. These are kids who go 0 to 60 right away. Tell parents, look for the emotional cues, and parents go, the cue is they're screaming and yelling. They don't give me cues. They go 0 to 60, boom. Okay. If we see children like this, jumping in and us getting louder doesn't help them calm down. Doesn't help them make a plan in the future. They need us to take a holistic approach to those emotions to help them actually notice the cues, because there are cues that are going on. We're just not picking up on what they are enough yet, or they're more internal cues, which are harder to read for us. And we need to talk to kids about when you start feeling this way, when you start noticing this, when you start doing that, that's when you want to go take a break, ask for a hug, get a drink of water, come to me and talk. Whatever the plan is that's going to work for you. Helping children develop emotional flexibility, helping children develop emotional regulation. Children who learn to decrease the number of times they struggle with big emotions, who learn to decrease the length of time it takes to recover from those big emotions, and who can decrease how big those big emotions get, are growing in their emotional maturity. I'll say that one more time. We're looking for children who are struggling with big emotions to decrease 3 things: the length of time it takes, the number of times we have a big emotional breakdown, and how big those emotions get. They're not all going to decrease at the same exact time. They're going to decrease in different increments at different times. But yes, when we have a holistic approach to working on big emotions, when we recognize the emotion is not the problem, it's how we're handling that's the problem. The emotion is just a signal to our hearts that God's given us as a gift, but where our hearts are handling it the wrong way, let's come up with a better plan. That's when we start seeing change. It takes time. It takes intentionality. Sometimes it takes a coach to help you as a parent work through it. But I've watched time and time again, children with big emotions, and yes, parents with big emotions, learn how to navigate them successfully. So when we see children using anger and control in relationships, and we sense this is just an emotional regulation problem, we need to focus on that. We're doing a lot more relationship building. We're doing a lot more teaching, coaching, transferring some responsibility. And yes, we're going to use firmness at times to support them in that move forward. We're also using vision casting. Here's how life's going to be better when you start doing this. Vision casting how the future looks when you start using the tools that we're giving you. All right. Finally, seventh reason why we see children using anger and control. It's what they've seen modeled for them. It's us. How many times have you seen your child and you thought to yourself, oh, yeah, that's me? Or you thought, oh, that's you, when you looked at your spouse. Maybe you thought that on the inside, right? It's because they're seeing it. And so the best way we can help our children in these situations is work on ourselves too. Take everything I've taught you here today and start asking those questions for yourself. If this one hits home for you, ask yourself those questions. Hey, what patterns are there that I'm noticing? I notice between 4 and 7 p.m. That's when I struggle the most with anger and control. Or the weekends are really rough if I get up after 10 or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what parents getting up after 10, but you know what I mean. Look for those patterns in your own life. Look for those cues. How do I know when I'm starting to get upset? And what can I do proactively when I'm starting to feel that way? What are my reasons? Why am I yelling at the kids? Do I not feel heard? Am I trying to avoid doing something? Am I trying to avoid climbing up and down stairs, having to check on things? Am I trying to avoid implementing some consequences? Or am I just not feeling heard? Do I call for my kids constantly and they never come? And so then I start yelling and screaming. Okay, well then that's what we need to work on. We need to change that. And oftentimes it starts with us. And finally ask ourselves, what are our triggers? What's triggering us that we get to this point? If we can start working on ourselves and modeling the right things, it's going to go a long way with our children too. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You don't have to be the perfect parent. You just have to be a parent who is actively pursuing Jesus and allowing him to faithfully work through you. Do that, and you'll start to see some great changes in family life.